Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Chris Tolcher with Parkway Pediatrics. Parents out there, I have a couple of questions for you. If your child wanted to play with a power tool, would you just let them do it without making sure you knew they were ready or even teaching them how to do it and monitoring them? Or here's another one. If they wanted to go on a play date with people that you had no idea who they were and it was unsupervised, would you let them? These are two questions that are good examples of our subject today, which is how can we as parents and anyone that deals with kids help them promote healthy use of their digital electronics? And for this conversation, I'm joined by Julie Frumin, who I've known a long time. Julie, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
By way of an introduction to Julie, Julie is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's been taking care of teens and very young adults for over 10 years. She is the mental wellness specialist at the Center for Health and Wellbeing at the Four Seasons right here locally in Westlake Village. She has a website devoted to this subject called Healthier Tech, so you can check out that for more information. And she also founded the Conejo Valley chapter of Mothers Against Media Addiction, also called MAMA. So quite an impressive resume. And I'll say one more thing. She says not only is she a therapist and a speaker on this subject, but she also is so passionate she calls herself an activist.
I do.
Am I right on that?
I do.
Julie, thanks. Really appreciate this. I'll lead off with you for two questions that I get asked a lot. Maybe the two most common questions I get from parents on this subject is, what's the best age to give my child their first cell phone or first video game set or maybe social media account? Number two is, doctor, can you please tell my child how much is too much when it comes to their electronic use? So let's start off with kind of the age and maybe dive into that first.
Sure. So I will give some ages. I know that every family is different. Every kid is different. That's a very common thing that people will say, but then parents are left there going, well, but seriously, like what? And when I first started hosting gatherings at my home, it was because a fellow parent had come up to me and said, hey, are you getting your child, my oldest child, who at the time was 9, are you getting him a smartphone this year? And it really floored me because I thought 9 was way too young, and I hadn't really nailed down what I thought at the time would be the appropriate age. But I knew based on what I've heard through the years from young girls looking at endless pictures of other people on Instagram that led them to feel bad about themselves, young boys perhaps seeing pornography way too young. I knew that having a personalized touchscreen that belonged to my child was not a good thing to do at 9 years old for many reasons. There's a lot of mental health correlational data that we knew at that time. Now we have causal data showing that, mental health harms happen as a result of too much technology use. And luckily, Jonathan Haidt wrote the book, The Anxious Generation, and his guidelines I agree with. So you want to wait on the first smartphone until after middle school. You want to protect those years. So that age tends to be about 14. And people will go, woo, well, what if I want to get in touch with my kid? What if I want to know where they are? And the good news is that this movement has been so powerful that companies are following suit. There are many dumb phones, some people call them safe phones out there. There's a lot of different models. The Wise phone, the Gab, the Gizmo. There's one even called TikTok. It's, it came out before TikTok blew up. But there's so many different things that we can do to be in touch with our children in ways that don't have an internet browser or the app store. And so I always say, at least get them through middle school without a smartphone. Then the recommendation Jonathan Haidt says in his book too is to wait until 16 for social media. And these are at the earliest. For every family can do what they're going to do, but at the earliest 16 for social media. And I agree with that too, because right when you start high school, your brain is so vulnerable. 14 years old is still quite little. And it feels big when it's your first child, your oldest child, you're like, whoa, you're so big. But later on, as your child grows up, you look back and you realize, oh, they're really they're so little. And they're so in that identity formation period where they're trying to figure out who they are in the world. That period is such a time in which, he calls it cultural apprenticeship, that we're literally looking around. We're in our apprenticeship years of how do I fit into the world? And so waiting until 16 at the earliest is really a good idea for social media. Now for gaming, people will say, try and wait as long as possible. But again, all games aren't the same. Right. And I know we lived through COVID. So a lot of people adopted gaming systems because playing Mario Kart was something we could do. Playing some of these multiplayer games like Fortnite was something that the kids could do together with their peers in real time. So I get that this is a hard one because a lot of parents will say this is social. They're talking to their friends. And I think a good rule, to go by is double digits, is to start to go, okay, you're 10. Let's look on Common Sense Media. It's a great resource. Let's read on Common Sense Media what parents say about and what experts say about this game, and because that is a better source than the App Store. The App Store is meant to sell, and Common Sense Media is meant to inform and protect.
Love that.
Long answer.
But no, it was so good. And you mentioned one of my favorite resources for parents, Common Sense Media, which, by the way, is a great website, has lots of everything from parent reviews, expert and parent reviews of movies, apps, video games, you name it. There's one of my favorite sections there is how to set the parent controls on the device, which is something we'll get into in a minute. You touched on something that also I wanted to get back to. The example that I gave about the unsupervised play date is kind of like being on the internet where you can really meet anybody and be exposed to almost anything. Yes. I mean, by the way, I'll never forget at a talk, I heard that the average age of first exposure of pornography is age 11 in this country, which coincidentally is about the average age of the first smartphone. That they get. And so that's one thing. And then the example of the power tool. These are powerful tools, and they're both exciting. I know they help both of us in our world in some ways. They can be used for good when they're used properly and used in a way that's educational, creative, positive, promoting social aspects. And even video gaming has a lot of positives for kids, from sense of accomplishment, social connection, but it exposes them to so many other things. So I think your advice is good, but it's got to be tough for parents to say, but Mom, all my friends have one. Why do I have to wait? I remember those conversations with my girls.
It's really tough. And this is why we have to do this in community. We don't want to harm our child by having them be the only one. So when I say activist, I mean for real. Like, I am talking to the school districts. I am gathering together parents as much as possible. Another great resource is the Wait Until 8th movement, which helps with the delaying of the first smartphone, because what you do is if you go to waituntil8th.org, it sounds like you're waiting until 8th grade, but in the fine print, it says the end of 8th. It just sounds better to say wait till 8th. It's a nice rhyme. But what you do is you go to the website and you put in your child's name, their grade, and their school. And they have the database of basically every school in the United States. And so it links up. Once you have 10, you're considered an active chapter, and you get the emails. It kicks you back. These are the 10 or more families who've also signed the pledge to wait until the end of 8th grade for the first smartphone. This gives our kids, I mean, it's still hard. It's still hard. The pressure is real. But this gives our kids a cohort, and this gives parents the peace of mind, because parents really we love our kids so much that we don't want them to be left out, and we just want to give them the best world we can. And really, the best world is waiting. The best world is joining together with others who delay this, and so that we can protect childhood and protect that super sensitive time of middle school. That we all remember middle school. We don't want that documented as much as possible. People are still going to have phones around, but we want to just keep that as safe as we can.
So true. And it really kind of highlights the fact that there are so many aspects to this decision as parents, but you don't want to be the one that's so strict and you feel like the ogre, but yet you want what's best for your kids. So the more we all do this together, the easier it's going to be for everybody.
Definitely.
The second question that I often get asked was, how much is too much when it comes to the amount of time they spend, they usually mean per day, on devices? The original advice, I've been doing this job a few decades, the original advice was more than 2 hours a day of non-educational screen time was too much. We've adapted it a little bit through the years, but we still, especially for younger kids, the American Academy of Pediatrics sets a time limit for kids, under 2 years old, not really limited. I mean, ideally none, or limited to educational and social things like FaceTiming, the relatives that live far away.
Right.
When you get to the 2 to 5, they recommend limiting it to about an hour a day, is what the AAP says. And then over 5, they say focus more on really the uses, the content, and the balance in their life. So what do you want to say about that? Then I want to dive into how do we help monitor that content and find the right balance?
Sure. So I would agree, before 2, if if you can, and I will say that I did not follow this rule, but if you can, before 2, none at all. Now, I think we have to really talk about what parents are going through. The reason I didn't is because my husband was working and traveling 5-6 days a week. We have no grandparents locally, and I work as well. So there were moments in which I would need to do something that I needed to know my child was seated and quiet, as best as possible. And there is truly nothing like a screen to pacify a child. It makes them into a little zombie. Now, I don't love it. I wish things had been different. I wish I could take it back. But I mean, the reality is, we're not aiming for perfection here. Exactly. So what I would do, and what I do recommend to people, is to have a big screen, a big shared screen. So instead of handing a child a handheld touch screen, which is it creates a different dopamine response. So when you're touching and moving things around, some pre-approved 30-minute show when they're really little, that will captivate them and give you that time to do what you need to do. In an ideal world, no more than that. 2 to 5, I would say stick with that, under an hour, ideally, with, again, pre-approved big shared screen. That way you are seeing it too. What we don't want, unfortunately what's happening is that we don't know where they're going when they're on these screens. Now, if it's on the screen and you have the remote, a 2-year-old can't change it from Sesame Street. They can't change it from whatever it is that you've pre-approved, because you've got the control. Right. 5 and up, I still feel like we don't need to be going over an hour-ish a day. Yeah. When we get into the teen years, again, it is different. They're on screens for school oftentimes. They are going to use them to connect more, but we still using balance is tricky. It can get away from us. I love the idea of using balance. I love saying, hey, have you done your chores? They should have chores. That's actually a pro mental health tip, is to have kids have chores. They feel like they're doing something. The data that we're seeing is, since the adaptation of all this tech, and since kids are spending so much time on tech, oftentimes they describe their lives as like that they don't have, not only worthless, they feel worthless, but they feel useless.
Meaning.
They're lacking meaning and purpose. And what we can give them as parents is to say, no, you are necessary in this home. Yeah. So we all need each other. We're all integral parts to this family. So giving them, for when it comes to balance, chores are a win-win. Also, has your homework been done? Have you read in a physical book today? Like reading is key, and people are reading less and less. Yeah. So we need to, emphasize that. Have they moved their bodies? And I'm sure as a pediatrician, that's really big on your list too. We're moving so much less than we ever have before. So making sure all of that. Have we socialized in real life? Have we done all those things? That's a good thing to try and figure out. But again, what we're talking about here is the reality of a busy family. And so a parent trying to track all of that each and every day is, I can imagine, a tricky thing to do. So parents are looking for no, just tell me. Just tell me. What is the amount of time? Mm-hmm. And really 2 hours is the right number. Any more than that, you are going to be out of balance, because we've got other things that we're doing. And the dosage oftentimes is the poison. If you are spending, what the average is right now, 7 to 9 hours per day. Amazing. For teens. For teens, exactly. For teens, 7 to 9 hours a day. We have seen that does not work for mental and physical health. Right. Point blank. I encourage timers to really literally set a timer. And then when it's over, I encourage a locked box or a safe. And I've worked with other families who do this too. And they say, you have to have it locked, because they will go find it. It's addictive. So, and we feel that addiction. It's really hard to not be checking our phones all the time. But a friend just said to me yesterday, we were chatting about this topic, as per usual. I'm always talking about this topic. And she was like, we don't negotiate when it comes to car seats. At a certain, when they're little, we're like, no, I would never negotiate when it comes to car seats. You get in that car seat and you buckle up and you go. We have these sort of non-negotiables as families. As this, conversation has become more and more out in the world, I think it's become more and more necessary for families to go, hang on a minute, let's be intentional about this. What are our values? And we need to set some rules about this, because it just sort of took over for the last 10 years. And now we're going, I think this is working. So let's set some ground rules in the home. And I think 2 hours is a good place to start.
I think that is very reasonable. And I think that on a related subject, because the answer used to be for me, just the answer to the question was 2 hours. And I throw that out. I totally agree that that's a good between 1 and 2 hours. But then I broach into the subject of it really ought to be a family discussion about intentional use of media. And another resource I'd like to recommend to everybody is on the Healthy Children website, healthychildren.org, which is the official parent-facing website from the American Academy of Pediatrics. There, you can, in the search bar, you can enter family media plan. And they help you break down the different areas where you can, and it breaks it down by age. You can literally put their name on it. You can print it out when you're done. And it helps you come up with those rules because it's so overwhelming. It's hard to know like where to start and how do we find the right balance. And something you touched on so much in that answer. It was so good. And some quick examples would be setting not only time limits, but for example, but other times of day when you want to avoid them, like family meal.
Yes.
The hour before bed,
yes.
In the car to and from school and at school, doing homework. Those are some times. And then you might even want some zones or places in the house where you don't want it. Again, they overlap there. You could say not in the bedroom, not when there's family time going on, things like that. So that's a family, we do have different maybe goals and maybe needs, and our kids are different too. There's so much variability here, both different ages, different developmental stages, different levels of responsibility and trustworthiness, which is really case by case. So the family media use plan can be really helpful to really kind of set some guidelines. So the key is you got to set them, decide on them, and involve if your child is old enough, let's say over 6 or 7 or so, involve them in the conversation. What do you think of this rule? Have them have some skin in the game and feel like they have some input. Now, you're the one that gets to make the rules, just like they don't get to choose whether they're in the car seat or whether it's time for bed, hopefully. But they at least have input and you're willing to listen. And maybe, okay, I like that one. Let's use that one. That's really powerful too.
And this touches on the way that we parent. And over the last couple of decades, this idea of gentle parenting, it's become more common, right? So in my practice, when I first started working with families, I found myself saying to parents all the time, well, your child's feelings are important. And then I realized the other day, I haven't said that in years because that is a given, which is a beautiful thing. I mean, it truly is. Yeah. Now I find myself saying, your rules are important. It's a bit of a shift. We do care about the way our kids feel, and we absolutely want to hear from them. At the same time, we want to make sure that we are parenting in a loving way and in a way that is still us driving the car. That actually comforts our children. And I think it's really cool to sit with them and explain to them why we're protecting them online. Yes. To explain to them, you know what? Your brain is this amazing thing that we don't even fully understand. But have you ever noticed that when we're on screens too much, just like if we eat too much sugar, that afterward we feel kind of that we feel maybe irritable or we want it so bad that we crave it? They get it. They're so smart. And we as parents can chat with them about that and say, this is why we're going to do it like this. And I get that it's hard. Yeah. A lot of times parents will say to me, gosh, I'm almost scared I'm scared to do this. This is this is going to be so difficult. And yes, and I want to sit with parents in that fear and that discomfort and of knowing your kids are going to be uncomfortable. Parents hate that. We hate it. We just want everything to be fun, right? And good. And that's not us doing our job, because in this one, it's not all fun. It's really, really hard, and it's hard for parents. That's another reason why I started this Mama chapter. We've got to join together as parents, and Mothers Against Media Addiction is not just for moms. It just sounds better than PAMA, Parents Against Media Addiction. But we invite everyone, grandparents, nieces, anyone who cares about kids. Let's join together. And so Mama as an organization has a 3-fold goal. The first one is parent education. Number 2, getting phones out of schools. And then number 3, fighting against big tech's hold on our government, making sure that these products, which our kids are using, are safe.
And as you're talking, I'm reminded of the movie Social Dilemma that came out a few years ago, which delves into this. And the gist of it is that there are these algorithms that are really meant to draw you in and keep you there. And that's how these things are developed. There
are people their business model.
There's a psychological aspect of this. That's how they make money. And what also strikes me is that when you interview people who work in these companies in the development, a lot of them don't let their own kids play with these or have these devices because they know. How scary is it? It would be like me as a pediatrician having a vaccine that I said, you should give your kids this vaccine, yet I wouldn't give it to my own child.
Right.
It's like I would do it just to make money. I mean, which by the way, I don't do, and that's bad. But how bad is that?
No, it's really bad. Because a phone or a computer, these are Swiss Army knives of tools. They're incredible. They have so much to offer. We need to use them in the right way.
Yes. Well, in fact, as you're talking, I'm reminded of two conversations I have a lot with kids. One is that it reminds me in this way, the dopamine, the pleasure center effect is also a lot with nutrition too.
Absolutely.
There's such an overlap there. Like, wouldn't it be great to just eat candy all day long? I mean, I would love that, but it's not good for you. And just like anything, just setting limits. I think the bottom line is what we're trying to empower parents here is that it is okay to in fact, it's a good thing to try to take charge of this for your family and yourself. It's okay. It's a good idea to set some rules and guidelines, and there's resources online to help you. And also, I want to touch a little more on the family communal aspect of this and the importance of our modeling. Our kids watch very much everything we say and do. Yes. And there's a saying that goes something like, the lecture that you just gave me may be true and wise, but I'd rather learn much more by watching how you live, essentially. And so they really, what we do is in some ways more important. So we have to be willing to follow these rules, model the right behavior. And one quick tip on that is that if you're on your phone because you're responding to something important, do a talk out loud where you actually say, hey, I'm responding to this text right now, or I'm ordering dinner, so that they know what you're doing. You're not just, in a rabbit hole.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in that, to like sort of build on that, invite them in, and say, hey, listen, yeah, absolutely. My boss just texted me and I'm responding to that. Or I'm on Instacart ordering a grocery order. Do you want to help me decide what to order? Bring them in. And so what that will stop you from doing, and what we don't want to do, is to passively consume in front of them, because that's what we don't want them to do. Right. And so what does that, that can be really challenging, but it's something to work toward. Again, we don't have to be perfect, but to think to ourselves, wait a minute, am I passively consuming, just shopping, or, looking for the next bathing suit? Or am I looking through Instagram? Am I doom scrolling with the news? Those are things that we don't want to do while they're watching. We absolutely can and need to respond to life on our devices, and we can narrate that. So that's a good one. Also, too, if we're making a dinner table rule, we have to follow that. It's completely, first of all, it's just rude, right? It's rude. Nobody wants to stare at the other person's back of their device. So our kids are the same. They don't want to see us do that, and we don't want to see them do that. So we need to own that rule too. It's a really good idea for you to also not sleep with your phone next to your bed as adults. So we know that we sleep better when ours are away too. And we are allowed to take baby steps, and that kids are not. So, all tech out of bedrooms at night for kids, and for adults, literally anything that's good for kids tends to be good for us too. Yeah. So, we do need to model. I also want to mention, I've started to get questions about would you be willing to do a couple sessions with my family to help to hold our hands through creating that family media plan? And at first I was kind of like, that's interesting. And now I'm like, yes. And I am happy to be your therapist, but also have you come in and work through this issue and send you on your way. And then you can call if you have any trouble. So we can always reassess. They don't have to come in. We don't have to do family therapy. We can just do this and say, hey, listen, you might be able to print off a plan online and do it on your own, but you might not, or you might struggle. And I'm very happy to be that person to say, listen, in this room here, we're going to co-create this as a family, and then come back and report back. How did it go? And do we need to tweak? So I think people really do need some help. It's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And the pleasure center wants what it wants, and then there's a logic center that says, wait a minute, that's too much. And I think so much of this is about not only empowering parents, but as parents, we want our kids to really have the mastery over this, that they themselves learn how to make the right decisions. That's the ideal end goal, but it's hard because that dopamine is what it is. The brain just wants, it wants to go more and more and more, pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. And it's hard to set those limits. And so when I talk with parents and kids about creating a balance, I always coach them, and we touched on it earlier, but there are other healthy competing priorities like sleep, nutrition, socializing, your education, all that stuff. But I want to pivot a little bit because you just hit on something I want to make sure we didn't forget to talk about, which is, so if I'm a parent listening to this, I'm thinking these are great. They're giving me good ideas, things I need to watch. If I'm a parent of a young child, I'm thinking how I can take some steps to prevent issues down the road. But what if I'm a parent of, let's say, a 14, 15, or 16-year-old? And as a parent, I wish I knew now what I knew back then. I would have made some different rules.
Same.
Right? We
Same.
all have regrets, so it's okay. You're in a safe space. We all are struggling with the same things, and the goal is not perfection. But what are the warning signs that my child might have an unhealthy use, I'll say, you might even say addiction, to their electronics, whether it's social media or gaming or whatever? What are the warning signs, and then how can they help them?
We all know when our child is not doing well. Like, we can look at them and we may not know why, but if you find that you are concerned about them, you're probably right.
Yes.
Also, the takeaway effect. So if you find that when you say it's time to be done with this, either the game or the phone or the iPad, and all hell breaks loose every single time. I mean, it truly does look like when you take away the drug of choice from an addict. And so that ruins a family dynamic. That is something that as parents, that we're just like devastated if that is what's occurring in our home. And that tends to lead us to give in more because it's just so horrible, to have to deal with that. And so if you find yourself stuck in that place where you're either just noticing more isolated behavior, a difficulty of putting it down, those are warning signs. And then if you've gotten into that trap of, oh my gosh, I can't even take it away, it's too hard to take it away, that's another really big warning sign. Of course, there are a lot of specifics in this world too. I have to touch on eating disorders because what we see with younger girls, especially if they have iPads and iPad games, are these image-focused games. So as opposed to boys that are sort of having fun, maybe racing cars on their games, the girls are getting little models dressed and they're doing their hair and it appears innocent at first, but what I've seen is that then when the teen or tween ends up getting their phone, there are pro eating disorder apps, many of them, and I've seen clients and children of clients get really sucked into that world. And so if you notice disordered eating, we really need to investigate what's going on. So with that being said, I think it's really important to make sure that you have the passwords of your kid's phone. And I also want to say that for a kid, people will tell me, oh, it's that ship has sailed. It has never sailed for our kids. There's nothing that a mama bear or a papa bear won't do for their kid. And if we know that our kid is involved in something that is harming them, we need to take action there. So one of the things we can do is roll it back. So my parenting philosophy is delay, teach, model. But in the parentheses after delay, you have to talk about rolling it back if it's not going well. Yeah. And people will say, well, what are we going to do with them if we take away their tech? What are they going to do all day? And so that lends itself to something we haven't really touched on, which is more responsibility, more play, more independence in the real world. So giving them this awesome childhood, as awesome as we can, like with their friends out in the neighborhood, taking them to the park, taking them to the mall, giving them these experiences that almost like trump the tech, so that way they're like, you know what, that was better than being home on my device. Because that's what we learn from experience. And if we just say, you know what, you can't have it, you just have to stare at the wall all day, then they're gonna be like, well, I can't wait till I'm 18 and I can do whatever I want. I'm just gonna be on my tech. No, childhood is so short and so precious. The goal is that we want them to have amazing experiences so that they have things that they love, hobbies that they love that are more engaging than their tech.
Two things come to mind as you're talking. One is I have a quick tip that I learned from a gaming expert. The meltdown when you say, hey, it's time to go or it's time to go to bed. How do you head that off? What I learned from this expert was, as a parent, find out how does the game end? Is it pausable or is it one of those that you can't stop it until there's a winner? And when someone's been working for 2 hours on this game and they can't pause and come back to it, if they stop, they're dead in the game. That sets them off, right?
Yes.
So you might want to say, well, hey, you might not want to start that game an hour before bedtime or an hour before we have to leave. So knowing whether the game can be paused or not makes a big difference. And the other is give them a peripheral warning sign, like your 5-minute warning, like wave something, flicker the lights in the room so they know that's their warning that they've got 5 or 10 minutes so that now they have a decision to make, as opposed to it's time to go. I thought those 2 quick tips might be helpful there. I also thought that I would just say that when I talk to parents and tweens and teens about this, in terms of what are the warning signs, I kind of look at 3 things. One is, how is it affecting your functioning? And you touched on that. The functioning of your life. Is it affecting school, sleep, socializing? Mental health is big. Pay attention to how you feel during and after doing that. Does it help you feel good and like I made an accomplishment? Or do I left just feeling angry or upset or anxious? In which case you're contributing to that, right? Number 2 is that if they're using it to a point where they're really just so obsessive about it that they almost have like the withdrawal of the addict. They just can't think of anything else to the point where it's hard for them to focus on their homework. That's a sign of an overly dependent behavior. And then I guess the third thing that I like to focus on is that, do you think this is controlling you or are you in control of it? When you've lost control of your technology use, where you feel driven by it, there's a problem. And that's where someone like you comes in. And I love the idea of someone as a therapist helping families, rolling things back, developing that plan. I love that idea.
Yeah, it can be so tricky. Our brains are so wild, but when we assess what we like to do, we judge it wrong. So like if you even ask somebody like, well, when are you the happiest? Are you the happiest when you're at work? Or are you the happiest when you're at home on your couch watching Netflix? And people will say, oh, well, of course, when I'm at home watching Netflix, not at work. But that's like, because that makes sense. And that makes sense, right? But when psychologists have done some studies where they've put an app in their phone that every 30 minutes, it asks them what they're doing and what their happiness level is. People tend to skew happier at work. Why might that be? Well, it's because these activities, when we have a goal in mind, that when we're busy, when we're with people, when we're moving our bodies, we actually are happier. It's so counterintuitive. And so what I like to encourage clients to do that are starting to think about their media use is to keep a time diary, and to every hour for a couple of days, just whatever they're doing, have a timer go off. They don't have to, it doesn't have to be through an app. You can just, set up a little system in your phone. Because then you will see, a client of mine, I was on Instagram and my happiness went lower and lower and lower, because in the moment you realize, that was it. Was that fun? Right after, to catch it and write it down. Was that fun? It wasn't. Now, boys on games tend to report that they are having fun, which is different. But oftentimes this sort of sedentary, isolated behavior isn't fun, but we think that it will be. So it's really an interesting thing to take stock, to do a little bit of a self-assessment or a family assessment, for a couple of days. I know it's kind of a big task to do, but again, that's why I'm coming in to help. This isn't complicated.
Yeah, and helping our kids set what are your goals for yourself and for your time, right? As opposed to spending in the rabbit hole of, whether it's unlimited game playing, lacking sleep, skipping meals and snacks, not socializing face to face. I think another thing that I wanted to touch on, what do you think about the idea? This is something I wish I had done, knowing what I know now, looking back. Picking an unplugged day, like maybe one day a week where we all agree we're going to put the phones in a drawer or in a locked safe and just play games, go for walks. I almost said watch a movie together, but that wouldn't be unplugging. But you know what I'm getting at. That teaches them that you can do it. And it also teaches them to watch the emotional side of things. And in some ways helps them develop that mastery that we want them to develop over this.
Absolutely. So this is something that a lot of people recommend. There's even a book about it called 24/6. And she talks about it. Her name is Tiffany Shlain. She's actually a local artist and author in LA. And she talks about it from the perspective of religious Shabbat. Even though she's not herself religious, she uses the concept of Shabbat, of unplugging and of being together and of being with family, and applies that to this. And she says her family does a tech-free Shabbat. And so my family has attempted to do that at times as well. It's been really great. It's not something, to be honest, that we are capable of every single Saturday, but we attempt to start on Friday night and have family time. To make it not an option is something different, because if you think you might get it, then you're sort of like, well, when and where and when is that going to happen? Is it now? And just take that totally off the table. If you can, take a vacation in a place that doesn't have good service. It's like this thing of like, I'm free from that feeling of freedom. We need to create that, because that is also addictive. Like I find I want more of that.
Yes.
I'm like, ooh, that's good. Those are good moments.
They really are. And in fact, I find that I crave silence more and more once I've started things like that, to find that with such a noisy, technology-rich, busy world, that just having that unplugged time, I wish I did more of it, frankly, can be really helpful. I wanted to add one thing in preparation for this, and this about this subject is what are the meaningful times that our kids will remember. I asked my 3 daughters in preparation for this, think throughout. They're now in older. One of them has daughters of her own. Our nurse practitioner Jenny, shout out to Jenny, and also my other 2 daughters who are basically from the ages of 28 to 32. Pick 3 or 4 of the most memorable childhood experiences you had. Open-ended question, and they thought about it. They got back to me. Not a single one of them had anything to do with technology or digital devices. Not a single one. They were all fun family events that were totally unplugged. So these are the experiences that you think it sounds like it might be torture for your kids. And that it may feel like torture at first, because it's kind of like taking their phone away that was my ace in the hole when my girls were young, and it was time to like have a consequence or something. I need your phone. That was sad to say, but that's what it took. But learning how to live life without it and appreciate life without those is huge.
It is.
And they really are memorable. You won't regret it.
It is.
You won't regret it. We've touched on a lot of great stuff here, and there's so much more that could be said about this. We'll probably need some follow-up talks, because there's issues of, the other way I like to think about this is being healthy, like having healthy habits and balance and focusing on the content, that it's positive and not negative. Being safe, which we touched upon, supervising, co-viewing, setting limits and guidelines, having a use plan and having intentional use. But then there's the other kindness aspects of it too, avoiding cyberbullying and doing things that are really more pro-social. I learned the phrase pause for people. Like when I walk into the room and a child's on their phone and the mom's like, Johnny, doctor's here. I'm like, dude, pause for people. It's a fun way to get them to think about when someone's trying to get your attention, pause or turn off the device and focus on the person.
Right.
So there's a lot that really could be said more about this. And those are some quick snippets there. Any other things that we didn't touch on yet, final either advice or guidance for parents that you wanted to offer? Other resources maybe, what do you think?
If you haven't read The Anxious Generation, I think
Jonathan
Haidt's book, it really tells the story of how we got here. And I think that it can be dark, at the beginning, but push through, because the back half really tells the story of how we're going to get out of this. And I truly want to say I'm hopeful. This conversation, when I first started 2 years ago, we didn't know what we know now. Even like within the last year, so much has come to light. So many things are happening in Washington at the state levels, within our school districts. And I think just even the fact that LAUSD banned phones from their schools, that sends a message.
Yes.
Wait a minute, what?
Yes.
Just to make people sort of pause and reflect about, whoa, okay, maybe this is something we should think about too. So I think a lot of good is coming. And I think that, I always like to lead with positivity and say that, I'm hopeful that more change is going to happen so that we live in this world with tools that make our lives easier, but that don't harm us. And I think the way that we can think about this is a fun, values-based activity as a family is to just really talk about what are the things we want. What matters to us? What are those experiences that we hope as parents that our kids say when they're adults? What are things that we want to do as parents with our kids while they're still in our home? And I guarantee you, again, most of those aren't screen-based.
Exactly.
Now, going to family movies, I love that. That is such a fun summer break from the heat. Absolutely. Stories are good. Talking through stories and plot lines and character development, all of that is really good. But we get our kids for such a little amount of time. And maybe I'm feeling a little bit this way because my son has been away at summer camp for 10 days and I miss him. But it does feel really brief. And the days can be long, the years are short. And so this is something we get to do. We get to sit with our kids and our, partner if we have one, and to plan out our life in a values-based way, and then assess what we're going to do about that. So I think it's a really, it's good.
It's so good. And my final bit of advice to parents is that, to summarize, it is okay to be concerned about your kids and to really want to set some rules and guidelines. And it is okay to sometimes encourage them to turn off and do it together. Model the right behaviors, like delay things as much as you can. Model the right behavior that you want to see in them, and not the, basically follow the do as I do, not just do as I say method of parenting. And you're not a bad parent for, number one, letting your kids have technology, but we want to guide them in the right way for safe use, healthy use, and promoting kindness and education and creativity. And we all need support in that. We all have regrets,
Absolutely.
and you probably do too. And if you do, it's okay. But as you said,
you're in good company.
You're in good company, and it's never too late to make those changes. And so I want to thank you again, Julie, for being here. Again, her website is Healthier Tech. She's available locally for consultations, and I do recommend her. I've known her a long time. And again, I'm Dr. Chris Tolcher with Julie Frumin. This is Parkway Pediatrics. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.